What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? Welcome into another episode of Drafting Lessons, the DLF TV show, where I grab a guest every single week and we mock a Dynasty startup or a Dynasty rookie mock draft. So today, I think we're going to stick with the rookie mocks, specifically the SUPERFLEX rookie mocks. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring on, I think, one of the smartest guys in this industry, author of the Analytics of Dynasty, Jordan McNamara himself. So Jordan, how's it going, man?
Addison, thanks for introducing me like that. I owe you the check in the mail, so that'll be on the lookout for that for that payment. No, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is awesome. I think previously when I've been doing these shows and stuff, I've been trying to get specifically with the rookie mocks. There's like the film or like the rookie type of people, whether you're on film or the analytics side of it, but specifically like college or Devi or that kind of specialty of guests. But and I consider you that as well too, but you are also very broad and very strategic, and the analytics of Dynasty and all that stuff is fantastic. And I think that you are going to bring a very different side of the Dynasty spectrum or the Dynasty mind into this show that I'm very excited to get into.
Well, yeah, I hope to, and I tend to look at things a little bit differently. So yeah, we'll see. I was listening to some of the other shows, so we'll see what I can muster up in terms of a team. I'm excited for this.
Alrighty, so for all you guys listening out there, this is another SUPERFLEX rookie mock draft. We're gonna do two of them, from the 105 and the 111. So we're just going to get right into this here. 4 rounds, SUPERFLEX out of the 5 spot, and we'll see where we are on the clock whenever we get into this. So we're just going to go right into it. All right, Jordan, kind of an interesting start and not one that I was expecting because I think this makes this pick pretty easy here. But
you made my life really simple.
The first 4 picks were Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tua Tagovailoa, and then DeAndre Swift at the 104. So at the 105, where are we going?
I mean, it's clearly Justin Herbert. No, I'll go Jonathan Taylor. He's my 101 in SUPERFLEX. I just love the profile. I thought this was going to be a little bit more difficult in terms of a J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers type decision there. When I found out it was going to be 105, I was hoping one of them was gone off the board, and it would make the decision easier because they're close to me. But Jonathan Taylor is the best player on my board, so I have taken him. I think I own him. I did my ownership percentages recently. It was like 40 or 45%. So I actually got out with a pretty good share of them, which was surprising because I got him at a remarkable number of 10. Like I had 102 and 103 in multiple spots, and I got him there, as well as a couple of spots where I took him 101. So I sort of got some puck luck there. But yeah, I'll take Jonathan Taylor here.
So for the sake of conversation here, not so much talking about Jonathan Taylor, because I feel like I talk about JT every single week. He's always the guy who's taken in the first round of all of these first drafts. You said that J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers would have been the difficult decision here that you were expecting, at least. So what would have been the decision if Jonathan Taylor was taken previously, and it would have been Swift, J.K., Cam Akers, any of the other wide receivers, Justin Herbert? How would that decision have played out for you?
Yeah, if I was sitting there at 105, which actually, now that I'm looking at this, that we'll have an interesting conversation at 205. I would have probably taken Cam Akers at 105. I think this year is the year to avoid quarterback in SUPERFLEX. The class is just so good that, and listen, the hit rate on quarterbacks isn't that high. And you don't get a lot of sustained success at a quarterback. You do once they hit, right? But the odds of people actually hitting, and the odds of taking a top 10 quarterback and turning them into a multi-year fantasy starter is less than a coin flip. And I think people can sometimes, it's about 40%. in terms of, you know, what I look for in terms of success, that's a pretty low bar. And so when you look at running backs and you know, wide receivers is a peg down there as well, but running backs really, I think you can get earlier success, and you can get, you know, they tend to be, once they hit, they tend to be denser hits too, which is actually something I dove into quite a bit in the Analytics of Dynasty in 2020, was that density thing, because I really wanted to get beyond just the hit rate, sort of the density, how deep their hit is. And so that's, you know, I'm leaning running backs over the quarterbacks and wide receivers in this class.
Cool. So you would have went Cam Akers over JK. Is that just because of immediate production, because of Mark Ingram being there with Baltimore, or did you like Cam over JK pre-draft and then just landing spots kind of solidified that for you?
You know, they were pretty close to me. And in terms of, for me, it's funny because they're tough for me to break ties, because I look at profiles as being so much more important than the player name. So, you know, give me the profiles, give me the backstory. You know, the draft pedigree is just an immense thing in terms of how these guys produce historically. Their draft pedigree is one of the biggest predictors, the most important predictor. Right. And so they're so, you know, those guys are so close together for me that it's tough. I would take Cam Akers, because I think you know, if you told me, you know, which players got the chance to make the biggest difference in 2020, or what players got the biggest, you know, who's the person that's the most valuable in this time next year, I think it's probably Cam Akers. I think he's got the higher odds for that to be. Not that it's a sure thing, but, you know, I think 70% of the time it's probably Cam Akers. So I would, and I think he's probably the one that's going to be the most productive. And I don't think that highly of Darrell Henderson. So I think he has a pretty clearer road than we might think. Right.
Yeah. Good stuff there. So, so we are on the clock here at the 2:05. You said that we are going to have some sort of a decision and discussion here, but just to let the people know, the second half of the first round went J.K. Dobbins, Justin Herbert, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Cam Akers, Henry Ruggs, and Jalen Reagor. And then the first four picks were Justin Jefferson, Keyshawn Vaughn, Jalen Hurts, and Denzel Mims. So we are looking at wide receivers like T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Laviska Shenault, Brandon Ayuk, Brian Edwards is there as well too. And then the running back, Zach Moss, A.J. Dillon, Antonio Gibson, and then Claypool, Darrington Evans, KJ are all down there as well too. But the 2:05 here, we already started out the draft pretty well with Jonathan Taylor. So who are we looking to pair with Taylor here?
Yeah, so when you had the screen up, I didn't realize it didn't show the entire first round. So I was like, oh my God, Cam Akers made it to me at 2:05. That is not actually what happened. I didn't see the rest of the screen. This one's my most owned rookie, A.J. Dillon. And basically anytime after Justin Jefferson is off the board, or let me rephrase that, anytime those four wide receivers are off the board in terms of Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Reagor, who's my wide receiver one, and Justin Jefferson, once those guys are off the board, it's a clear pivot to me. The next player on my board is A.J. Dillon. Again, you look at profiles. And, you know, my common joke is if you put A.J. Dillon and LeBron James in a combine competition, A.J. Dillon's going to win it. That's just the type of athlete that he is, and just how productive he was. All of the production in terms of yards after contact, I think led the country by just an astronomical amount. And when there was a stat, and I can't remember the exact. It was, he had more like yards after contact per stack against stack boxes than I think Jonathan Taylor had against stack boxes total. Right, like it was just some crazy number. And when that's just it's unbelievable. And I think I got the order of that right. I mean, he's just a unbelievable player. And again, you're getting that second round pedigree, and it's pretty wild. One of the people that does some writing for me actually went back and looked, and since 2008, A.J. Dillon's one of the top 5 cheapest round 2 running backs in startup ADP in their rookie season. So you're getting, not only are you getting a great profile, you're getting a historic discount. And so I'm a real big A.J. Dillon fan at his cost this year. And again, if you were to tell me, I have to pay, I got to pay 106 for it, that's probably a different conversation. But basically anytime after 201, I'm ringing that bell.
So I was really hoping that you were going to take AJ Dillon at some point today, because I was listening to you on the GOAT District podcast, and you basically said the same thing about how AJ Dillon has been a smash draft pick for you in a lot of second rounds and stuff like that. So I was really hoping to talk with you and have kind of this conversation, because I think it's really interesting, that you said that, with him being a second round pick and the profile and all that stuff, and that he's the cheapest second round pick since 08 or, around there.
Yeah,
and
one of the top 5. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, how much does that, I guess not so much like his situation, but kind of his situation, and the fact that he, in 2020 at least, is going to share the backfield and potentially have, 2 other running backs, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, there with him as well too. So you can keep talking. I'm going to turn this phone off. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I mean, I guess my case for Dillon is, in a dynasty league, I'm not quite as worried about week 1 production in terms of a rookie season. I think this is probably going to be a delayed gratification rookie year generally. I do think if you're depending on a rookie this year, I think it's just structurally, I think there's a lot of reasons that's probably a flawed strategy. No rookie mini camps, right? No OTAs, no, who the heck knows what's going to happen with training camp, social distancing. Are people going to be able to practice? I don't know, right? All of those things, but you're already so far behind the curve in terms of just player development. I think that there is a systemic risk to running backs, or excuse me, to rookies in general this year. So I'm not super concerned about getting production this year, because I tend to think that it's going to be a lower rate. Mm-hmm. But add on top of that, I don't, generally speaking, in the second round of rookie drafts, I'm not super worried about. I'm just worried about the profile. Give me historically good profiles, and I just want to stack them on top of each other. And what'll happen is last year for me, for example, 2 of my big target players last year were Damian Harris and Alexander Mattison. And it was because at their price, they were, again, historically really good bets. You look at day 2 picks, the hit rate on round 3 running backs is 40%. And I projected, and I was wrong on Damian Harris so far, but I projected them both to be backup running backs. I was right with Madison. We'll see what goes on with Harris. I think has a more of a role to carve out, but it didn't really happen in 2020. And you look at the injury rates on running backs, which I think is also something that might go up this year. Mm-hmm. Because of conditioning injuries and heck, if COVID-19 hits players, I think that's a likely thing that happens in terms of players miss games because of that. This year, all of those risk factors present really, really well for backup running backs. And so as a class, just investing in as many backup running backs as I can is what I think a pretty plus EV strategy, or I think it's a high value strategy. It's even better when they're really good profiles, and when they're day 2 pedigrees. And so you look at, I read people sort of ragged on a Green Bay pick, their draft in general. I sort of read it a totally different way, which is, I might not have done what they did, but that might not have been the strategy that I would have went with. But let's just assume they were acting rationally. What does it say about their strategy going forward? Right? It almost speaks to the fact that they want to turn the page, and are sort of looking in a new direction. AJ Dillon is certainly a different direction from Aaron Jones. Mm-hmm. And so is Jordan Love from Aaron Rodgers, right? So if I sort of took that and if they're going to spend a top 65 pick on a running back like AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones is coming up on a contract, and if Aaron Jones is gone AJ Dillon's not going to be going in triple digits in ADP in 6 months from now. So, or 9 months from now, I guess. So that's really the case that I would have. So it's not necessarily I need an immediate production, but again, now I'm stacking him with Madison and I'm stacking him with Damian Harris and these other backup running backs that I have, especially when you get a good pedigree. You add those all on top of each other, and it's a really high upside strategy historically.
Yeah, I think, listening to you and then also diving in more to, the Green Bay Packers situation as well, too. I've started to kind of change my tune a little bit on A.J. Dillon because I previously, like before the draft, he was kind of a guy that I wasn't really like all that into. I thought he was going, pretty high in terms of like pre-draft rookie drafts and stuff like that. So it wasn't really a guy that I was all that into. And then he got drafted by the Packers. And then my initial thought was like, well, he's automatically the RB3. Nothing really to go there. And then you look at the contract situation. So you said, Aaron Jones is going to be a free agent after this year, as is Jamal Williams as well, too. So I find it highly unlikely that both of those guys are going to be re-signed, which, kicks A.J. Dillon up. And then the ultimate upside would be that Aaron Jones is the one that they let walk and then they re-sign Jamal Williams. Or, I mean, if they love Dillon so much, they don't re-sign either one of them and then they draft a guy next year as well, too. Either way, Dillon is going to spearhead that offense should Aaron Jones not come back. And he is a vastly different back than Aaron Jones is, and so I think he's a very nice complementary piece to Jones and to what that offense and what they want to do with running the ball so much and taking the ball kind of out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, then eventually into Jordan Love's hands, which is only going to be better for, for running backs and running the ball and stuff like that too. So Dillon is really interesting to me, I think, in the second round, and it's mostly because of you. So,
well, I appreciate that. And honestly, one of the things about running backs there is embrace risk, right? Because by taking the risk that a player's going to produce nothing, right, this year, you also take on the risk that they produce a lot, right? Like it isn't just and if A.J. Dillon doesn't do anything this year, right? Okay, you still have that same argument for 2021, but from this deep in a draft, right? If Aaron Jones goes down in week 3 or at any point, right? If he goes down in week 12, right? Or at any point that Aaron Jones is not in the lineup, A.J. Dillon's probably a locked in play.
Right.
If that happens early in the season, that's I have a metric called WARP, which is wins over replacement player. That's the type of thing that can move your record a win or a win and a half, right? By adding that type of player. And you look at guys, Latavius Murray was the awesome example of this last year. In 2 weeks where Alvin Kamara was out, he improved your season-long, assuming he was in your lineup, he improved your season-long win total by half a win. In 2 weeks. That is an enormous outcome. You probably went 1-1 at least, if not 2-0, if you started Latavius Murray those 2 weeks. That's the type of outcome that backup running backs can have. So you don't need to get a full season out of them. They don't need to be a full starter. Heck, if I get 2 games out of A.J. Dillon this year, I'm probably pretty happy. And the upside of that could be even more. And honestly, I have all of those types stacked on top of each other. And it's the same sort of profile bet that if an injury happens to the starter, I'm going to capitalize in a pretty asymmetrical way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that too. And I love how the thing with running backs is, and I've heard you say this as well too, is that when you can start them.
Absolutely. Right? Where it's really difficult to do at wide receiver, right? Like you'll know, right? If I could hand you if we flash forward, we'll call it a year because we don't know when the season's going to start. But if I just handed you a schedule from last year or from, the 2020 schedule at this point next year and say, here are the games that Aaron Jones missed. How many games did A.J. Dillon start, right, for you in your lineup? You could probably tell me to the number, right? Because it's going to be almost any week that Aaron Jones is out. Those clear decision-making processes, when you build around them, add so much efficiency to your total points over the course of a season, which is a big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to move on here to the 3.05 on the clock here. The rest of the second round went Jordan Love, Joshua Kelly, T. Higgins, Zach Moss, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk, and Laviska Shenault. And then Brian Edwards, Darrington Evans, Antonio Gibson, and KJ Hamler were the first 4 picks of the third round. So at the 3.05 here, we are looking at Chase Claypool, Devin Duvernay, Van Jefferson, Tyler Johnson, Antonio Gandy Golden as the wide receivers here, Anthony McFarland, Lynn Bowden Jr., Eno Benjamin for running backs. So Michael P. Ryan, DJ Dallas is there as well too. Jacob Eason at quarterback. Any of the tight ends are still out there as well. So what are we looking at to do here at the 3.05?
Yeah, I think Lynn Bowden is a really interesting play this year. My pick is going to be Cole Kmet, but I do think I got to shout an honorable mention to Lynn Bowden because you get a day 2 pedigree type. It's a weird profile, but you're getting a huge discount because to get a running back with an ADP. A running back selected in the 3rd round of the NFL draft with an ADP in the 3rd round of rookie drafts is very rare. You know, it happens less than half a time. But you know, I think it's like 0.4 times a year it'll happen. So it's a really rare occurrence. So anytime you get that, that's just a great pedigree collection in terms of collecting profiles. And the difference between a round 3 running back and a round 4 running back is actually round 3 running backs are twice as likely to hit for a top 24 season as round 4 running backs. So it's a big difference. And so I think you really have to look that way, but I'll take Cole Kmet. You know, if you can get the tight end 1 in the mid 3rd round of a rookie draft, historically hitting tight end in the 3rd round of a rookie draft has been a really, really good bet. I'll just take the top tight end in this class in the mid 3rd. I mean, that's I can do a patience play and go from there. That's just a profile bet that I like to take.
Yeah, Cole Kmet is interesting because I mean, as the class overall, this tight end class is really weak. Not only in terms of you know, like player profiles and stuff coming out of college, the combine, all that stuff, but then also, you know, the NFL told us what they thought about this tight end class, and they didn't really care about a lot of these guys. You know, Cole Kmet and Adam Troutman and then Devin Asiasi were probably like the 3 most relevant ones, as well as if you want to say anything about Albert O, who was my tight end darling before the draft and then kind of got, you know, killed a little bit in the actual NFL draft going to Denver. But Cole Kmet kind of establishes himself as the best and most talented tight end on the Bears, even with Jimmy Graham there as well too. I mean, it's like a 33, 34-year-old Jimmy Graham who had complications and stuff with the knee and everything like that. We all know Jimmy Graham's story. So Kmet is a really interesting one just in terms of, like you said, a patience play. You're going to have to wait him out. But I do believe that the Bears want to utilize the tight end position. That's why they have like a dozen on their roster. And if Cole Kmet can separate himself and become that lead tight end, I think it's a valuable asset to own.
Yeah, and they have become, it's almost a comedy at this point. They have the highest 2020 positional allocation for the tight end position in terms of cap spending, the Chicago Bears. And then they address the position in the 2nd round, right? It's just, they're just chasing money after this position and can't quite fix it. You know, with Burton, and Burton hasn't stayed healthy, and now Jimmy Graham, which seemed, it was quizzical when they did it. And then to sort of follow that up with Cole Kmet didn't make a ton of sense. You know, and they missed on Adam Shaheen. And like you said, they have a lot of depth there. But again, it's a patience play. I'm not really, you know, one thing I looked at in the book was something I call base rates, which is just tell me what the player's pedigree is and tell me how long they've been in the NFL in terms of profiles, right? In terms of guys who haven't hit yet. So you're talking your younger guys, and sort of what does that do for their hit rate? And one of the things at tight end, you just don't see a lot of year 1 hits. So it doesn't really hurt them in terms of their future production. So I'm perfectly fine taking a patience play at tight end because I think it's the play that you have to typically historically make at tight end.
So the only other question
and
I have
the hit rate on round 2 tight ends is 48%. So, yeah, go ahead.
So the only other question I had for you then, in terms of this Cole Kmet pick was, Chase Claypool is there as well too. He was the second round pick. KJ Hamler went the pick right before you, also another second round pick. Would KJ have, been your pick there if he was available, or is it still the Cole Kmet way? And I guess we have the answer on who you would take between Kmet and Claypool.
Yeah, I take Clement over Claypool. I would take Clement over KJ Hamler, but KJ Hamler has been my later third or fourth round even rookie pick. You're getting some, again, it sounds like I'm just repeating myself, but that's how good of a class this is in terms of NFL pedigree, in terms of NFL draft pedigree. The average, there are 14 guys this year who qualify as being above average rookie draft picks in the first round in terms of NFL draft pick pedigree, which is the best since 2008, since we have ADP data. So, I mean, that is just at every turn you're getting a good pedigree. You're getting a good pedigree player. You're getting a pedigree discount historically. I would take Clement over KJ Hamler. And again, it's a little bit of a confusing situation, but at his cost, I'll take that bet.
Awesome. That's good to hear because I'm a Penn State guy, so I love me some KJ Hamler. And anytime we can talk positively about him in a situation, I'm all aboard taking advantage of that. So, Jordan, last pick here, 4.05. The rest of the third went Claypool, Isaiah Coulter, Devin Duvernay, Tyler Johnson, Adam Troutman as the tight end 2, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Anthony McFarland. And then the first 4 picks of the fourth round went Lynn Bowden, AGG, LaMichael Pirine, and Eno Benjamin. So at the 405, we're looking at Van Jefferson, Jacob Eason, and Jake Fromm are the quarterbacks here. DJ Dallas, Devin Asiasi, Albert O, Quintez Cephas, Gabriel Davis, Bryson Hopkins, the Bryants at tight end, KJ Hill, a bunch of all these kind of dart throwy kind of players down here. So who is the last pick of this 4-round rookie mock?
I didn't catch. Is Troutman gone?
Yes, he went at the back of the third.
Okay. Yeah. But Devin Asiasi isn't, right?
Yeah, he's available.
Okay, I'll take Devin Asiasi. Again, day 2 tight ends. It's that late in a draft. I just have to ring that. Have to just keep ringing that bell. Again, historic class in terms of pedigree discount you're getting, and this is just a class to load up on those. Just keep taking good profiles and good historic pedigree bets, and this is just another one of those. So,
my only question here: Van Jefferson was also available as well there too. Second round pick. Repeating the good profiles and stuff. What's the difference there for you between Asiasi and Van Jefferson?
Van Jefferson was just so not productive in college that I
should not have been a second round pick.
Yes. And typically, I mean, I think it's a great point in terms that you bring up. He probably shouldn't have been, and you and I might not think that he should be, right? We might think it was a bad pick, but generally speaking, I think the way to look at these situations is you have your opinion on a player and then, which is fine, like pre-draft, but then you should move towards where he's picked. That's not to say you should go all the way to where he's picked, but if you really like a player and he is drafted a lot later than you expect, that should be a warning sign. Mm-hmm. The same as for if there's a player that you didn't like that goes a lot higher than you expect them to go, you should regress it towards that pedigree. That's not to say you have to go all the way there, but it is to say that you should adjust for draft pedigree and rethink it and move towards where they were selected in the draft, because it's a huge indicator. I'm not a huge fan of Jefferson, so he's going to be down the line. But again, just the pedigree that you can get in the 4th round of drafts is just wild this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So good stuff there. So that's the first of the 4 rounds. All right, so we're loading in here to the second draft here, the 1.11 on the clock. So this one I think should be a lot more interesting here, just because we're talking about not only a completely different set of players, but in the later rounds of all, or the later picks of all these rounds, is where things get a lot more interesting with some of these players. So on the clock at the 111, the first 10 picks went Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tua Tagovailoa, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Herbert, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, and Jerry Jeudy. So at the 1.11 here, we are looking at Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson, Henry Ruggs, Higgins, Pittman, Keyshawn Vaughn, Denzel Mims, Laviska, all those other kind of second-round wide receivers here. So at the 1.11, where are we starting this draft off here?
I mean, I could make an argument for A.J. Dillon. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't take him quite this early. I'll take my wide receiver 1 in this class with Jalen Reagor. Just incredibly productive from a really young age in college. I think we could debate landing spots. I tend to think it is one of the better ones in terms of you have a quarterback. I don't love Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz is good enough and stable enough to support wide receiver production. And I think it's a good team, structure there in place as well. And the production from such a young age, those 18-year-old breakouts in college, just a really, really high hit rate. So he's my favorite wide receiver of this class. So to get him as wide receiver 3 at 111, assuming that I was in the championship last year, that's just adding to the fire.
So the wide receiver 1 you said, was he the wide receiver 1 before the draft as well too, or did he move because of the landing spot?
I didn't have to do rookie rankings, which was fortunate. I tend to wait until after the board because I want to, sort of like that exercise I talked about where you should regress it towards pedigree. Mm-hmm. I don't want to, written something in pen and it's a lot harder to move it once I write my notes down, have thoughts, and then once the draft happens, I put a board in play. He was right there. I thought CeeDee Lamb probably over him, sort of in a neutral setting, would probably have been my play. But I think Reagor. I still like CeeDee Lamb, but I think it's a less clear situation to me. And ultimately, I mean, Jalen Reagor screams Brandon Cooks 2.0 to me, which is a very, very good profile, and people don't give Brandon Cooks the respect that he deserves. But that's, 4 top 15 seasons. That's fantasy gold.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's might not be a very favorable comp to a lot of people who don't like Brandon Cooks. But I'm all in on Jalen Reagor. I feel like he's the first round pick of every single second mock that we do, just because he's always there at the end, and everybody's like, well, it's Jalen Reagor, it has to be. So I think that kind of really shows me how the community, and at least the analysts that I've done this with, is that they're all really high on Jalen Reagor, and that's it seems to be the pick for a lot of people, and that just shows me even more so. It makes me more so confident in my opinion of Jalen Reagor, because I do believe that he got the best landing spot of the first round wide receivers. I'm not a huge like Carson Wentz is really good. I think it's going to be a really stable environment for him. He comes in and almost immediately takes on the wide receiver 2 role with a fantastic opportunity to be the wide receiver 1 this year. And I think he's just going to get kind of thrust right into it. He can be a special teams guy. He can do all that stuff. And, add on top of that, his collegiate and analytical profile. And you have a fantastic opportunity for a great fantasy wide receiver there. So I don't think there really needs to be anything more said about Jalen Reagor. He's fantastic. And if he's there, you need to take him.
Yeah, I'm with you. You put it perfectly.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of practice. Again, everybody takes Jalen Reagor. So Jalen Reagor was our pick at the 111. And then Justin Jefferson went at the 112 here. And then it went Henry Ruggs, Keyshawn Vaughn, Denzel Mims, Michael Pittman, Higgins, Laviska, Anthony McFarland, Brandon Ayuk, Zach Moss, and Antonio Gibson as the first 10 picks of the second round here. So we will probably be taking A.J. Dillon here, but for the sake of the conversation, let's assume A.J. Dillon was not available, and we are picking between the guys like Bryan Edwards, Chase Claypool, Darrington Evans, Hamler, Duvernay, Cole Kmet, all those other guys here, because I know your pick would be A.J. Dillon, but let's assume he's not there.
It would be A.J. Dillon. It would probably be the way this board broke down. It would be, this board breaks against me, basically, the way that this went. Antonio Gibson is essentially, so the way I have ordered it, basically with my board, in most of the time, I would say how it works out is it goes A.J. Dillon, and I have Ayuk, Higgins sort of in there together. I have a lot of Ayuk just because he tends to slide into that middle-ish, like about where he is right now. So I think that's what's that one? Is that 208?
208.
Yeah. Into that range, that's sort of the pick I make there. And then it tends to turn towards Antonio Gibson or Zach Moss at the end of the round. So this board basically breaks against me, like exactly right in front of me. So I would take, my play in that situation has been Cole Kmet, for a lot of the reasons I stated earlier. If I would be jumping up and down, and I would have tried to been trading up for 4 or 5 picks to have gotten A.J. Dillon. But I would take A.J. Dillon if he wasn't, if I could. Otherwise, I'd take Cole Kmet.
Cool. All right. So no. Nothing for Bryan Edwards, nothing for Darrington Evans here, who I think has also an interesting profile, just in terms of being the backup to Derrick Henry, who, again, we're talking about the potential for injuries, and, he's on a franchise tag. What is that future and everything there? So I guess just overall, I'm curious, what is your take on Darrington Evans?
Yeah, again, he's one of those guys that's sliding into the 3rd round of drafts from day 2. Right. And that's a really rare, you're getting 2 of them this year, which has never happened. 2 running backs in the 3rd round of rookie drafts with their ADP from round 3 of the NFL draft has never happened in the same year. So that's how good of a class this is. I like him quite a bit. I would be on him. He's essentially the player I take after Cole Kmet. So my board gets pretty boring, and it just becomes pretty clinical. It's just sort of, I joke that I could write my rookie draft plan on an index card, because that's sort of the ordering in which I go. It would be him, and then it would be Antonio Gibson, and then Antonio Gibson, Cole Kmet, and then Darrington Evans.
All righty. Yeah, good deal.
And then Bryan Edwards too. I haven't gotten a lot of Bryan Edwards. He would sort of fall in after that, and people just, I think, like him more than where he would fall on my board. Not that I don't like him, but I'm just not high enough on him versus this class to get much ownership of him. It's just sort of the way the board falls. So it's kind of like last year I owned Alexander Mattison in 75% of my leagues. I just can't, there's just not enough shares for me to get all the players that I like in this class. So the same thing. That's why I have, 45, 50% of AJ Dillon. It's just hard to get more of him at his cost than I am.
So you're like the perfect person I wanted to ask this to. Since we're talking about Bryan Edwards, I was listening to our DLF Dynasty podcast, Ryan, Dan, and Matt, that everybody who's watching this should go check it out, because it's a fantastic podcast. But they were talking about basically breaking down the rookies and their landing spots on all the teams and stuff, going division by division. And they hit the Vegas Raiders, and they were talking about Bryan Edwards. And it made me think about, what the possibility would have been for Edwards had he not gotten injured, prior to the combine, and then actually performed at the combine and all that stuff. And we actually got to see a whole body of the pre-draft stuff for Edwards. And I think that would have massively boosted where he actually would have gotten picked. So I'll ask this to you. Does that weigh in at all to you? Is that the fact that, his draft pedigree basically slid due to injury, or was it maybe not entirely because of injury? And then is there anything like maybe historically, because I know that you dive into all that stuff, that you've seen in terms of players who slide due to injury and their production in the NFL?
Yeah, it could always break either way in terms of his combine, and the Tyler Johnson's a good foil for this conversation, right? So he had basically no showed the combine, but I would consider had largely a terrible pre-draft process, but I think on paper they have generally similar profiles, right? I think the analytics community likes both players, and we see a gap open up in terms of their pedigree. So I think, could Edwards have gone higher? Yeah, I think so. Could he have gone lower? It's possible too. I guess with him, I think I heard this case made with regards to Henry Ruggs before the NFL draft, which was really interesting. And it was that essentially you wanted Henry Ruggs to go to a place that was a really bad wide receiving core, because he's never in his career shown that he can drive a high market share.
Right.
And that essentially the way for him to be productive is where you have to ram it down his throat in terms of targeting the ball, basically, right, because you have no other options. Mm-hmm. Which was an interesting theory, and it actually looked pretty good for the Raiders, and then they drafted Bryan Edwards. So mm-hmm. I think Bryan Edwards he's interesting from his profile is really good, but from hey, let's bet against the wide receiver that has never done it, right? In terms of, I think it's 5. It's either 5 or 6 wide receivers drafted in the first round of the NFL draft that never broke 20% in market share since 2003. I think it's 5. That's about right. They're 0-for. So, I mean, that's, they haven't hit. It's a small sample size, obviously, but I mean, you just look at the guys who haven't hit, and they're at whatever their pedigree is, it's pretty low in terms of their hit rate. So, I guess he's basically an interesting bet against Henry Ruggs, on top of the fact that the profile is really good. So for him, I haven't broken down specifically in terms of injuries or missed combines or anything like that. I would just say, I think the pedigree, him going on day 2, that's a much better deal than him falling to round 4, round 5.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just interesting how a lot of people in the Dynasty community, they like Ruggs because first wide receiver off the board, first round pedigree, all that stuff. Obviously, he's going to get his chance. But like you said, the Raiders kind of hedged on that bet with Bryan Edwards, who a lot of people seem to believe will actually be the Raiders' future wide receiver 1 instead of Ruggs. So that just
which is wild, right? Like,
right.
It's an interesting. I'm not sure we've had that. I have to go back and look where we've had 2 guys taken on in the same class. That one, the later drafted one was better than the earlier drafted one. I'd have to go back and look at that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's some homework for you.
yeah. I'm going to have to dive into that. You know what happens when I get homework? I end up diving down a rabbit hole and never coming home. And then I end up with a 150-page strategy book. So that's how these things get started, Addison.
There we go. I feel that. So we're on the clock here again, 3.11. Bryan Edwards was actually the pick after I just clicked AJ Dillon for you to get you another share of him. And then Bryan Edwards. And then the 3rd round went Cole Kmet, Joshua Kelly, Chase Claypool, AGG, Darrington Evans, KJ Hamler, Devin Duvernay, Lynn Bowden, Jordan Love, and Eno Benjamin. So at the 3.11 here, guys are Van Jefferson, Tyler Johnson, Adam Troutman, Jalen Hurts, and Jacob Eason are there at quarterbacks. Michael P. Ryan, DJ Dallas, Devin Asiasi, Jake Fromm, all these other guys who were here in the 4th round of the previous draft. So I think I know where we're going here, but 3.11, what are we looking at here, Jordan?
I think the answer is Adam Troutman for me. So he's my tight end 2. I like the profile, again, coming out of the smaller school, but very productive. He goes to what I would consider generally a good landing spot, although writing off Jared Cook is I think a fool's bet right now. So again, I am taking Adam Troutman as a long-term patience play. You can't be scared off in the next 12 to 24 months because he can't pass up Jared Cook. Jared Cook's very good. And it's been, at this stage of his career, he's basically the ultimate post-type sleeper. He just keeps being productive after what was, I think, largely a disappointing start to his career. So he's one of my favorites in terms of this, in terms of bridge guys at tight end. So I'll just take Adam Troutman, and it's a patience play. But I like the profile, and I think he's going to develop into a starter going forward.
So my only fear with Adam Troutman, I've heard other people say this as well too, is that I think a lot of people recognize that he is a long-term play. But the problem is that a long-term play on New Orleans equals no Drew Brees. Is that an all? I'm assuming it's not an issue for you at all, but
it could equal Jameis Winston.
That
right? Which isn't which from a fantasy perspective, like put aside the Jameis Winston disaster show that he can get into with some of his decision making processes, but from a fantasy perspective, I mean that's pretty compelling. So I mean he's been a very productive fantasy quarterback and productive for his players too. And we don't. Do we really think Sean Payton can't put together a highly productive offense? I mean, I love Drew Brees, don't get me wrong, but I think we saw it with it took a step back a little bit with Teddy Bridgewater. I think that might be a different conversation about Teddy Bridgewater, but I do think that we would see still a good, maybe not a great, but a good and serviceable Saints offense in the post Drew Brees era.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well too. As long as Sean Payton's still there, I still trust that offense and that system and what they're going to be able to produce. And if he ends up, Troutman comes out as the team's tight end one, I think he has a fantastic opportunity, to be good for fantasy even without Drew Brees. And even if I would say even if that's still with Taysom Hill, if for some reason they go down that path.
What's your thoughts on that? Is there like
oh man,
like give me the all right. Hey, let me ask this question this way. I'm hijacking your show.
That's right.
What are the odds that give me the odds that Taysom Hill starts a game in his NFL career? Like, what would you peg that at?
Does that include? Oh, I guess not, because I was going to say if Drew Brees gets hurt this year, but James will come in.
Right.
Oh man, what would I put the odds at? I would say 15%.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, I think that's like a fair assessment. I think the Saints are putting it out like it's 170,000% chance that that's going to happen. It's just the Sean Payton talk of him. It's wild. I mean, if he was going to be a franchise quarterback, we would and everything too. Like they did put their money where their mouth is, but if he was a franchise quarterback, I think we would know it before now. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. It's just that whole situation is just really weird to me. I don't know what they're trying. Well, I don't know what their plan is. Why they hype him up so much?
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't really understand it. So before we make the last pick here, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was Jalen Hurts was also available at that 311 as well too. So I guess overall, we haven't talked about any of the quarterbacks outside of when we talked about Jonathan Taylor at the 105 last draft. Just overall, what are your thoughts on where these quarterbacks should go and where do you have them in a super flex draft? And, is Jalen Hurts, I've seen a lot of people be like, yeah, Jalen Hurts is like a smash second round pick in super flex rookies because of the opportunity that he should get to not just be a potential, backup and an injury starter for Carson Wentz, but also being worked into the mix a la Taysom Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the overall perspective, I would probably take Burrow at like 105. So I would take him ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and take the other four guys in front of him. Maybe we could debate about Swift, I think, but I would. He's either 104 or 105. So I'm getting 0 shares of him. Tua is probably in, right after that, in that range. I have Jalen Hurts is confusing to me. I think I might've picked up a sole share of him in like a start one league. Just, like late 4th round, something like that. It's confusing to me because I don't, with a player like him, and I don't like these types of situations where I don't have a clear idea of what's going to happen. I guess he's a 1 injury away quarterback. And I guess he's behind, a quarterback who has shown the ability not to stay healthy. I'm not sure how predictive that is, and I'm not going to use the injury prone label.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, it was a weird pick for me. And so I just think if I'm looking in that second round of rookie drafts, by and large, I think you're getting a better profile there than him almost at any point. And that tends to fall into the third round too. So I just find myself out on him. I like the player. I'm not sure I love the cost versus the clarity at this point. And for me, like Darrington Evans is a very clear decision-making process, which I like. And maybe it's to a fault that I like those decision-making processes that easy, but it's clear to me sort of how he's relevant. It's not super clear to me if Carson Wentz is out, am I starting Jalen Hurts? I'm not sure. And so those, you're starting a rookie quarterback, all of those things. I mean, is he going to take Carson Wentz's job? Is he a permanent backup? Where at least with Jordan Love, he's up a couple of tiers in my board. I can make the case that, listen, it's going to be a patience play, but at least I have light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not sure I ever have that on Jalen Hurts, which is kind of a tough thing to want to invest in when the other players are so good around him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I hear you on that one for sure. And Jordan Love has always been an interesting conversation just because, he has to see the field at some point. We say I say that like every single week, like he has to see the field to justify that pick, or else what did they do that for?
Yeah. And honestly, we saw this with Mahomes, and I'm not going to put him in the same category in terms of talent. I think Mahomes is a generational quarterback, and I don't use that term lightly.
There's my thumbnail. Jordan Love equals Patrick Mahomes from Jordan McNamara.
That'll draw me some vitriol on Twitter. But one thing that's always struck me, and when you hear NFL people talk about it, it's always struck me, and maybe you didn't really realize this was going on as it was happening, but anyone that was ever around Brett Favre loved Patrick Mahomes because they presented and played in a similar way, right? So it's not shocking that Andy Reid would fall in love with Patrick Mahomes, right? That was essentially what the argument was, is that anyone that ever was basically attached to Favre, just realized the brilliance of Mahomes. That argument has again been made for Jordan Love, right? Which is that it's a little bit different, but he has these traits, and it's, I guess, not surprising that the Green Bay Packers would be the team that drafts him, right? So when you with that history there with Brett Favre, so I mean, I think people poo-poo the pick and people kind of poo-poo the player. It's a different case to me for a guy like Josh Allen because the pedigree is so much different. But I think he represents an interesting, if you're getting late in the second round of a Superflex draft, I think I picked up one share of him, in that range. I think it's I think, again, you have to be patient in terms of these. And sometimes the most contrarian strategy in all of Dynasty is actually to be patient.
That should be like a t-shirt. I'm going to make that a t-shirt. I love that.
People play this long. They want, let's get in and, I'm going to draft in a startup draft. Oh, this guy can be a starter for 10 years. And then come week 3, right? Like the guy hasn't produced, 2 top 5 finishes. So you're out on him, right? I mean, that you see that happen all the time. I mean, I just playing the long game on people can be very, very lucrative in terms of how you do it. That's not to say constantly be building, but to make investments that are actually long-term, high, good historical bets, but might take 12 to 24 months to pay off at the right cost. I mean, if a couple years comes from now and Jordan Love as a starting, as a top 12 quarterback, I mean, that payoff and that patience from 210 or wherever you're taking him in a rookie draft, like that's pretty high. I'm not going to say the odds are super high on that, but you have to have the patience to, when you take him there, actually have the patience to hold him until it comes to fruition or doesn't.
Yeah. Alrighty. So last pick here, just to wrap things up here, Jordan. The rest of the third and fourth round went LaMichael Pirine, and then Van Jefferson, Dalton Keene, Devin Asiasi, Donovan Peoples-Jones, DJ Dallas, Tyler Johnson, Jalen Hurts, Gabriel Davis, Jacob Eason, and then Quintez Cephas. So at the 411 here, the epitome of dart throws. I could read off all these names here, unless if you have a guy off the top of your head that you would be looking at. I don't know why it won't let me scroll down past 59. Oh, there we go. There's a whole bunch of other. Do you have a guy in mind that you want me to check on?
I just can't see who the best running back on the board is.
Best running back. They got Michael Warren.
That's an interesting one. Man, the Alberto is interesting here. I mean, I'll take Michael Warren because I think I like guys in this range of the draft that are clear decisions for me, which is that is a lot of the reason why I don't. I think it's inefficient largely to hold developmental wide receivers because the development rate isn't that high, and you don't have a clear. You never have a clear decision on them. Mm-hmm. With a guy like Michael Warren, he's either going to probably be a backup, like the backup to own there or in some sort of committee, or he's going to get cut, which is fine either way. At least I'll just know what to do with him. What I hate on the back end of my roster is like the Jeff Janis types, right? Where you're waiting 4 years for this guy to develop and all he ever is a special teams player. And you're like, oh, I got to hold him. Like he's just a roster clogger.
Right.
That is a little bit what Albert O is. I mean, I have a hard time seeing how he gets to fantasy relevance. And I think you and I liked him both, but he's one of those players that the NFL pedigree really spoke to me in terms of we got to put the brakes on this.
Yeah.
Because I thought he could have been the best tight end in this class, but there's something that the NFL is seeing, and 32 of them saw it, right? That there was something. This wasn't it's not like you get a guy that goes super high and it's just one team that did it. 32 teams passed a lot of times. So I'll take Michael Warren just because I think he's got, of these guys left on the running back scale, I think he's the one that's got the best opportunity to be a one injury away running back this season.
Alrighty, yeah, good deal. So, and it was funny because Alberto went at the 412. So
yeah,
so there we go. So that is it. Then that is the 2 4-round Superflex rookie mocks out of the 5 and the 11 spot. So Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today and running through all these players and strategy and talking about basically everything that I've been wanting to talk with you about and then some. So I'm going to give you the opportunity now to let the people know where they can find you on Twitter, what you got going on, all that good stuff. So I'll get you your time now. Oh,
thanks. Thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity, a lot of fun. You can find all my work at analyticsofdynasty.com. You can find the 2020 edition of the Analytics of Dynasty. It's got a lot of stuff we talked about, and it's funny. I write it in advance, and then a lot of the things that I put in the book were very topical this year, just by probably just randomness, but it was a lot of things in the book that are topical. A lot of super flex strategy, a lot of different ways to look at quarterbacks that I think have a lot of value. So if you're playing super flex, I think it's a must in terms of your strategy. A lot of different ways to look at players, a lot of the base rates and density rates that I talked about, a lot of different strategies on roster construction that I think are valuable and are pretty contrarian. So you can find all that at analyticsofdynasty.com/shop. And if you're looking for more audio content, you can find me. We have the Football Guys Dynasty Show. So on the Football Guys Network, you can find me there. And you can go to patreon.com/analyticsofdynasty. I have all of my audio, premium audio content there for the entire month of June. I am doing a player a day value review. So 30 for the month of June. If you become a Dynasty tier member, which is $10 a month, you're going to get 30 podcasts for the month of June. So, so you can find all that at patreon.com/analyticsofdynasty. And I have a data package over there too that's got plenty of data to help you in your leagues.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I mean, Jordan, for all the people listening, Jordan is one of the smartest guys out there. And
you're doubling the check that I need to send you, by the way.
I'm serious though, because you've made me shift my strategy in terms of Dynasty roster construction. I've up until this point, I think it was like at the beginning of the year, this offseason, I really looked at, my dynasty teams, and I was like, I need to change a lot of this stuff around, because up until now, I was like a wide receiver guy where I had like 12 wide receivers on my roster, and I'm like, man, I really like this guy could hit, and stuff like that. And it's, I've since shifted into more of your kind of dynasty roster construction, because it makes so much sense. But you don't think about that until someone tells you about it, or you read about it and do all that stuff, and you're the one doing that. So it's fantastic, fantastic content and stuff and all that. So
you haven't lived until you rostered 5 running backs to every 1 wide receiver. You haven't lived until you've done that.
I don't think I can go. I don't know if I have rosters deep enough for that, but yes, that is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, though, is that kind of strategy and dynasty conversations that need to be had. So Jordan, I very much appreciate you coming on and talking with me and all this, and to all the people watching out there, make sure you go and follow Jordan everywhere, grab all the content, get it all in. And thank you guys so much for watching, for tuning in. Please, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel, ring that notifications bell to be notified whenever we drop another video, including more of these, the ADP show with Ryan and Dan, the mailbag show with Chris and Adam. I'm doing like weekly kind of one-off like video article kind of things. I just did the top 5 wide receiver dynasty buys, top 5 wide receiver dynasty sells, and more of that stuff to come over the entire summer until we get into the 2020 season, when that's a completely different content conversation. So
it'll be November at the pace we're going.
Oh man, don't even talk about that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you guys later.